listen-only mode.
Welcome to the TCM Group's Mediation and Leadership webinar. Thank you for joining us today. This is the first of a series of webinars provided free by the TCM Group. Please feel free to type questions into the chat box, which should be displaying on your screen, and we will try to answer as many as we can. I would now like to hand over to mediation expert and founder of the TCM Group, David Liddle.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everybody to this of the first of our series of webinars, focusing in particular here on mediation and leadership. My name is David Liddle, and I'm sure many of you will know me as the founder and director of the TCM Group. I'm really looking forward to talking through the role that managers and leaders can play in embedding mediation best practice and principles within your organisations. I've set up about 120 mediation schemes in organisations across the UK over the last 10 years, and I'm a real advocate and passionate supporter of the role that managers and leaders can play, both working as mediators within your organisations, but also the role that they can play in championing mediation, supporting the mediation process, referring parties through for mediation when there is a dispute or a conflict in their offices and workplaces, and also providing the resources and the support to actually make mediation a key function of your organisations. So the focus for today we'll begin with a brief definition of mediation. I know a number of people here on the webinar today will have some understanding and have worked with mediation in the past, but I'd like to start off with building up a consensus around what mediation is, how it works, why it works. I'm also going to then argue that managers make great mediators. In fact, I'm going to argue that the best mediators your companies have are your managers and leaders. So we'll look at the role that managers can play in delivering mediation support within your organisations, some of the barriers for managers and how to overcome those with a little training and support. Managers benefit from mediation as well. We're going to explore some of the benefits that your managers and leaders will have, both when they undertake a mediation process with someone in their office or in their workplace, but also the benefits that they'll have from acting as mediators within the organisation. Managers often say to me that they want a practical and straightforward framework within which to practice. I'd like to share with you some ideas I've got about how managers can embed mediation into their day-to-day leadership and management activities. We've recently undertaken a survey of managers that we've trained, and I'd like to share with you 3 or 4 key statistics about the benefits that mediation has had from those people in the survey. And we'll focus on the role of management, the role of mediation in terms of performance management, handling conflict, and general confidence of your managers and leaders. We'll look at the 5 core competencies that mediating managers need to possess in order to be able to manage conflicts effectively, and then we'll draw some conclusions from the webinar. The webinar is due to last for 45 minutes. If we have got time, there'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the session. However, please do ask questions as we're going along, and obviously I'm happy to answer questions offline as well. I'll also provide details of future webinars. We've got a very exciting program of webinars planned, and I'll provide some details as we approach the end of today's session. So I hope that you enjoy the webinar. It's the first time we've done this, so apologies if I'm slightly nervous. I'm used to talking to a room full of people rather than a screen, but I hope that you're all smiling and enjoying yourselves already, and I can feel that coming back at me. So what is mediation? It's a process of dispute resolution. I'll stop there for a moment because many people mistake mediation as a cosy chat over a cup of coffee. It's not. It's a key process, and it's an important part of organisations' dispute resolution, grievance, and disciplinary processes. It's not a cosy chat. It's a well-organised and well-thought-through process. It's the intervention of a neutral third party, and by the way, managers can be neutral third parties, and we'll explore how managers can overcome some of the barriers to impartiality during the session. Mediators are impartial, and unlike other formal processes, mediators do not make a judgment. And this is where mediation differs so radically from many organisations who have applied a quasi-judicial or adversarial approach to dispute resolution. Those organisations who are using mediation are reporting real benefits, and one of the key benefits is that the parties reach their own resolution. We don't need people to tell those in conflict how to work and how to react to each other. The mediator's role is to help the parties find their own solution, and in doing so, the solution is more sustainable, more constructive, and is likely to have a larger and more lasting impact. And of course, as we all know, mediation is voluntary, and it's confidential. So it creates a safe space for the parties to have conversations. This is what managers say to me they want to happen all of the time. The management instinct is to get the parties around the table, give them a chance to talk, give the parties a chance to listen. What they often say to me, however, is that the existing policy framework within which they work actually hinders those conversations happening. So why do I believe managers make great mediators? They're already doing this. Some people say to me, well, managers can't be mediators. They're not impartial. It's not safe. They're going to be partisan. They're going to be taking a view. Well, I say to those people, but your managers are already acting with integrity. You might be using a coaching model to handle performance and to build high-performing teams. Your managers will be part of recruitment and selection panels. They may be involved in at the other end in disciplinary and dismissals. They may be undertaking workplace investigations, mentoring programs, performance management. For many organisations at the moment where more and more HR support is devolved down the line, many of your managers are actually undertaking devolved HR functions. They're already doing this. So why is it when there are conflicts or disputes do organisations remove the role of the manager as and almost blocks their ability to handle these disputes and conflicts because of the sense they can't be impartial? They are already doing that. Managers understand the culture, the context, the values, the vision, the nature, the makeup of the team. They're best placed to be able to understand the issues that the parties are bringing, the nuances, the challenges, the emotions, the feelings, the values that each individual brings. They're also able to ensure that the dispute resolution process links in and fits in with their values and their vision for the team. So there's a linkage between the leadership function, the values, and also the interactions between the parties. Effective managers are already encouraging innovation within their teams, and as part of a webinar I'll be running later this year on mediation and economic growth, the innovation that comes from teams to drive economic growth is absolutely critical. And as we know, disputes and conflicts hinder innovation, and they prevent people from being creative in the way that they work together and find resolution. Managers actually can encourage innovation and already are doing that. The manager acting as a mediator can also ensure that there's an alignment between the corporate values of your organization, their own leadership values, and the needs of their team and their own management practices. One of the challenges I face when I'm brought in as an external mediator is I only have a very fleeting view of what the organization's value and vision are, and whilst I might create a particular resolution for the two parties, there's not necessarily congruence between that resolution and the values and needs of the organization. The same goes for those people who work as internal mediators. While they may have a better understanding of the values of the organization, your managers and leaders who live and breathe the values of your organization are best placed to ensure that the resolution that's created at a local level meets the corporate objectives and the corporate values. Effective managers understand the nature of the psychological contract. The ability to forge boundaries, to create frameworks within which parties can work, and to forge the psychological contract between themselves and also parties, the individuals within their team, is absolutely central to building high-performing, effective teams. Why, when we experience a conflict or a dispute, do we then rely on a grievance process where actually diminishes the ability for the manager to forge these boundaries and create contracts at a time of challenge and controversy, instead handing it over to a third party relying on an adversarial process? Upskilling managers and leaders to resolve disputes and conflicts will enable them not only to resolve those pressing issues, but actually create effective boundaries and frameworks for future performance within those teams. Arguably, therefore, the dispute is transformed not just from destructive to constructive, but actually is transformed in a way which will deliver economic benefits to your organizations, adding to your competitive advantage, adding to your position in the marketplace. And finally, if we look at some of the thinking, some of the theories around transformational leadership, and I'm bearing in mind in particular here Bass and Avolio's work in 94 and 95 around transformational leadership, those of us who promote transformational leadership or see those aspects of transformational leadership as being important recognize that actually the role of the manager and leader is about building consensus and seeking collaboration within teams. For those organizations who are training managers to work as mediators, they are actually offering a model of leadership which is around transformational leadership. And whilst the conflict itself can be challenging and difficult to resolve, once the manager has sought a resolution and brings those parties together, they can actually build a level of consensus and collaboration which will drive transformation in the future and ensure that the team is resilient and is able to deliver economic benefits and advantage to your organisation. So managers make great mediators. However, for many organisations, there are many barriers that are put in the way of managers working as mediators. And for me, the largest and most significant barrier to managers working as mediators are grievance procedures. And as many of you will know, if you've heard me speak in the past, the best thing we can often do with our grievance procedures is take them to the nearest shredder, and that will often deal with those and actually unlocking the potential within managers and leaders and writing those into resolution procedures and removing the grievance mechanisms that we've relied on and actually have not been fit for purpose is a major benefit to your managers and to your organisation. So we work with a number of organisations, so here's an interesting quote from Marks and Spencer's. We trained a team of mediators within Marks and Spencer's, and that's delivered real benefits to that organisation. And for those of you on the webinar who have trained managers and as mediators within your organisation, I'm sure you've already seen some of the benefits that those have brought, and we'll look at some of those in a moment. So managers benefit from mediation as well. So not only do the managers contribute to the effective organisation and add economic value to the organisation as well as the human benefit that we've been discussing, they will benefit as well in their role as managers and leaders. I think the first one is the nipping it in the bud philosophy. The ability by managers to identify conflicts at source and nip those in the bud, to feel confident and competent to be able to do so. And in our conversations with managers, they feel neither competent nor confident to be able to do that. And for many organisations, the managers and leaders who are dealing with these issues, somewhere along the line, they've lost the ability to have a common sense, difficult conversation. How managers benefit from mediation is it gives them the confidence and competence to have a difficult conversation, to discuss the emotions that go with the conflict and help the parties reach resolution. I was delivering some training, and I asked the managers on the training course for some of the barriers for them to act as mediators. And one of the barriers that came up were the issues of feelings and emotions. And one of the managers put their hand up and said to me, "But David, are managers allowed to ask their staff how they feel?" And for me, that was just so telling in the way that our managers and leaders react to feelings and the emotions coming through from the parties. Of course, managers should be asking their staff and employees how they feel. Of course, they should be creating environments for people to be able to discuss these safely and effectively. It isn't rocket science. We don't need degrees in quantum physics for the managers and leaders to get parties around the table and start talking about how we feel. And it saddens me that our managers and leaders may be in a position where they don't feel confident and competent to have those conversations. But the good news is that mediation provides a structure and a framework whereby the managers can have these level of conversation and they can start to have a common sense discussion with their employees and within their teams. Another key benefit for managers, of course, is the burden of conflict on managers. And this is often unreported and not recognised. Of course, we're very effective at measuring the burden of conflict on the organisation, employment tribunals, compromise agreements, attrition rates, absence, and so on and so forth. But the actual burden of conflict on the manager is also significant. And I've just identified three key measures here. The first one is the impact of stress on the manager. For many employees who bring grievances, they don't realise the impact that the conflict is having on their manager. And when I speak to managers, they're telling me about not being able to sleep at night. They don't want to come into work during the day. They're feeling anxious being in meetings with individuals. But very little is done necessarily to manage or to recognise the stress that managers feel when they experience conflict in the workplace. Mediation is an opportunity for them to have their voice heard as well as other members within their teams. The impact on the feelings and the injury to feelings that can exist through conflict is it's palpable for them, and that leads obviously to the drop in morale, the drop in goodwill that exists within teams, the very fabric that the teams need to be able to work together. Managers feel that first quantify and measure, but significant in its impact. And of course, the time that managers spend dealing with conflict, a recent CIPD report suggested that managers spend a third of their week dealing with tension, conflicts, and disputes in the workplace. That's a significant impact on any individual manager and as an organisation as a whole. A further benefit for managers, of course, is this challenge between performance management and subsequently an individual feeling that they're being bullied, harassed, or want to raise a grievance. And there's a real pattern within a great number of organisations that I work with where a manager seeks to address poor performance in the workplace, the individual subsequently raise a grievance, and HR are then required to seek some form of a remedy. They're not easy issues to resolve, they're very challenging. And the residual effect on the manager is that they feel that they're not able to manage performance, and sometimes it's just easier to turn a blind eye to poor performance and do nothing than create the challenge that's going to come from handling performance. On the flip side of the coin, of course, when we talk to a great number of managers about how they manage performance, again, they're not equipped, they're not competent or confident. And I sometimes describe it as management by tutting. If someone's walking late into the office, in the manager's head, they've had a conversation with that individual, you know, you're late, it's having an impact on me, it's having an impact on my team. They look at the clock and they tut. The individual who's walked in late didn't hear the conversation in the manager's head, they just heard the tut. The next day, the manager looks at the clock again when the person walks in late, and this time they're really getting a bit more severe. This is having a big impact on the team. We really need to resolve this. I need you not to be late into the office. It's making me feel anxious and worried. They look at the clock and tut. The individual employee doesn't hear the conversation in the head, they hear the tut. The third morning, now I've had enough, and the manager explodes. How dare you, I've told you 3 times walking into this office late, you're affecting the workflow of the team, you're letting everyone down, you're affecting the customers. And what the individual hears there is the outburst. They didn't hear the conversations in the head. And what mediation offers is an alternative to management by tutting, forgive the term, but it provides the managers with an opportunity to voice their concerns in a constructive way, which will enable the individual employees to hear what the manager needs, for the individual employee to set down what their needs, goals, objectives, and values are, and for the manager and employee then to create a framework within which those 2 individuals can work together. It really reinforces that collaborative and consensus-based approach to performance management. And again, I would argue that the adversarial or more draconian approaches, and they are often implicit within performance improvement plans, although we all know performance improvement plans are not meant to be adversarial, we also understand that they are perceived as being adversarial and that they are an opportunity ultimately for the employer to dismiss the employee. What mediation offers is a far more effective collaborative basis for resolving performance management issues. Another benefit for the manager, of course, here is the ability to use mediation to transform destructive behaviours into constructive interactions. The root cause of conflict, of course, is loss, loss of confidence, loss of esteem, loss of future, loss of a goal, loss of purpose. And those losses arising from a series of unmet needs, which then give rise to destructive behaviours as we communicate those to one another. The manager, as a mediator, is able to transform those destructive behaviours, and in doing so is able to identify the emotions and the feelings of the parties, them to be discussed in an empathic and safe environment, and then from that to identify what the needs are of each of the individuals in the dialogue. That then builds a stronger, again, more coherent relationship between the parties based on empathy and understanding and appreciation rather than blame, vitriol, and dogma. And again, those effects, that impact can be very powerful for managers. A further benefit for managers, and there are many benefits. I guess when I was writing this, I realized that actually any slide should never have more than 5 points and should be graphically very exciting. And I've got 7 points, and I wouldn't describe it as the most graphically exciting slide, so forgive me for that. But for me, I am very excited about this. And I think the next element is very, very important. If there's a dispute or a conflict and we delegate the responsibility for that to an investigator or to an HR professional or indeed to an external mediator, that individual will gain significant intelligence, not just about the actual matters in hand in relation to the conflict, but also the nuanced intelligence about the current state of play within the team, the interactions, the morale, the effectiveness of the team. And it's a very limiting exercise to delegate that responsibility elsewhere when the best people to resolve the dispute are the managers, and actually they will gain so much knowledge and intelligence about what is happening within their teams. That intelligence and information can be used to forward manage the team, to drive change processes within the team, to undertake any number of exercises in terms of building productivity and performance within the team. So to delegate this to another third party strikes me as missing a very important opportunity for leaders to lead and managers to manage. And the last couple of points I think are also important. The sixth one I've mentioned here is the ability of mediation to help foster a high-performing culture. For me, thinking about the elements of transformational leadership, high-performing cultures defined, for me as a mediator, are defined by collaboration, consensus, and effective conflict management. For a leader to drive high-performing teams, there has to be a level of discord and disagreement within those teams which is handled effectively and sensitively. So managers using conflict effectively and sensitively can actually drive competitive advantage. And the best and most effective leaders and managers aren't just responding to conflict in a proactive way, they are actively seeking out areas of conflict within their teams and using those conflicts to develop creative conversations between those individuals. So my argument as a mediator is not only is conflict inevitable, not only is it healthy, actually a level of conflict within teams is absolutely essential in order to be a great organization and to drive a high-performing culture. And I think for many organizations who are anxious about conflict or see conflict as a threat, the idea of conflict being a healthy or actually an important aspect of the organizational framework is anathema. But again, when I'm exploring mediation and economic growth, I'll be arguing that conflict is absolutely central to economic growth and the drivers that it will bring in terms of creativity and change. And finally, we shouldn't ignore the customer experience. Whatever role that your organization plays and whoever your customers may be, the impact on customers of conflict and disputes within the workplace, within clinics, within shop premises, within distribution centers, does impact the customer experience. So the handling of conflicts and disputes by managers and leaders ensures that the customer has a positive experience of your organization and therefore will undertake repeat business, upselling opportunities, but there's further a reputational benefit. And if managers feel that their work as managers and leaders is having a benefit not just to the individual team members, but also to the organization as a whole, you're likely to see a far higher level of engagement of your managers in further change programs and further development of your business. So therefore, not only is mediation offering an opportunity to resolve disputes, it's enhancing the customer experience. Your managers and leaders feel better engaged with your organization and are likely, therefore, to be drivers of substantial change in the future rather than just the recipients of change or the people who feel that they are the voice piece for the organization's change programs, but they don't feel necessarily included. I'll just take a sip of water. Again, for those of you who've worked with TCM, and obviously this webinar is a free webinar, it's been targeted specifically at organizations that we've worked with. Firstly, as a thank you to each of you. So in some sense I didn't start off by saying that, but I want to thank every one of you for having worked with TCM in whatever capacity you have done. These webinars are provided free of charge primarily to our existing customers, both as a way of saying thank you, and also because we know that our customers are coming back to us asking for more and more sophisticated information, frameworks and strategies for embedding mediation within their organizations. I've never seen mediation used in the way that it is at the moment, and so many organizations now are seeing mediation not just as a driver of dispute resolution, but a driver of real change within their organizations, and it's an exciting time to be a mediator. You'll be familiar, I'm sure, with our fair mediation model, and we're very proud of this model. It's a very highly effective model. We use it for training professional mediators, but we also use it for training managers within organizations. Facilitate, appreciate, innovate, resolve. So the managing mediator in the first instance is there as a facilitator to make it easier for the two parties to come together. So the first stage of the framework would be for the manager to meet all of the parties separately As we would as external mediators, an individual meeting with each of the parties gives them an opportunity to vent, to have their voice heard, and in some ways to construct the conflict in a more constructive way than they would do if they were sat at their PC and their keyboard writing an email or writing a grievance. So in some respects, it's drawing on some of the coaching and mentoring principles, using active listening skills to allow the parties to discuss their feelings and their emotions. And I'll talk through some of the skills that managers use at that stage of the framework. But all mediations undertaken, whether they're small M mediations by managers or large M from an external mediator, should involve an initial confidential discussion with the two parties. It also presents an opportunity for the parties to reject mediation and to withdraw from the process, as well as building a commitment to mediation. The appreciate stage in the FAIR model is about empathy. It's absolutely key that the parties are able to put themselves in each other's shoes, and by talking about how we feel, rather than blaming and pointing fingers, talking about how I feel and the impact of the dispute on me, allows us to move away from the defensive conversations that obviously often exist around conflict. It transforms the conflict from blame to empathy. And empathy is central to the building of strong relationships, as I've said already. So the role of the manager in the first instance is to offer a level of empathy and appreciation with the parties by acting in a non-defensive manner, by enabling the parties to speak, not judging them or blaming them, but encouraging them to be open and honest, and listening to them, really giving them a jolly good listening to. And once we've done that as managers, we can then bring the parties together in the joint meeting. The joint meeting is set up in the same way as it would be for in any other mediation process. We establish some ground rules about respect, openness, honesty, and confidentiality. We invite the parties to speak freely to one another in the first instance in an uninterrupted manner. Party A is enabled to speak to Party B, and we ask Party B to listen very, very carefully. Once both parties have spoken to each other, the manager is able then to summarise some of the key points, again remaining impartial and objective, reflecting back to the parties what they've said. And then we move into the exciting phase of mediation when we have the exchange and the dialogue, and this is the opportunity for the parties to begin to find innovative and creative solutions. And often the manager hears something like this, but if only I'd known you felt like that. And of course, as mediators, what the manager is able to say, but now you know that, and now you have that learning and that insight, what will you do differently tomorrow? So through that stage of mediation, the manager is driving innovation, creativity, and change in behaviour. And change in behaviour can only come from a level of understanding of the impact of our behaviour on others. And that can only come from a level of appreciation. We can't mediate or resolve conflicts or disputes without that level of empathy. And of course, the manager is also seeking a resolution. And the mediation process delivered by a manager enables the individuals to reach a resolution, maybe to make pledges to each other, to agree to the number of actions or interactions between themselves going forward. And the manager can record those, write those for the individuals, or it may just be a simple verbal agreement. But that's something that's agreed between the individuals and the manager. And of course, what the manager can do, and this is so important, is they can forward manage the situation. The manager now has a level of control. And when I speak to managers about conflict, they feel out of control or they feel they're being controlled by the situation. The manager now feels in control. They understand the issues. They can forward manage the resolution. The parties likewise feel in greater level of control. And as we understand from psychological theory, the absence or lack of control is a significant factor in the level of stress and trauma people experience. So given a level of control at the resolution stage is a key element in the therapeutic or the healing effect, if I can use that, of conflict resolution for managers. So moving to the next slide, there's a piece of research which we undertook last year at TCM, and we're undertaking further research in 2012, some of which is in partnership with Middlesex University, and some of which is in partnership with Personnel Today, as well as research that we're undertaking here as an organisation. So we are becoming far clear about the need for good, solid evidence to underpin our research and that mediation works. So this was a survey that was undertaken in 2011. Sample population equals 13, and this is taken from 13 managers across different organisations. It's about 6 different organisations who were asked for their feedback and comments about mediation. And this is some of the evidence that we received. 100% of managers who were trained as mediators feel more confident after the course dealing with conflict at work. I think that's a significant step up, bearing in mind that the confidence and competence of managers is one of the barriers to them resolving conflicts or disputes. So every manager who's been trained feels more confident. 90% of the managers had seen or believed that the training had led to improved relationships within teams. If we look at the any number of pieces of research in terms of the areas where mediation is being used, relationship breakdown between individuals within the team or between individual and their manager is one of the biggest causes of conflict. And over the 90% believe that mediation was building stronger relationships within their teams. And then 95% of those people who responded to our survey agreed or strongly agreed that mediation has had a positive impact on staff productivity. And again, taking the points I was raising earlier in relation to economic growth and performance and productivity, 95% of people trained as mediators believed that was having a significant benefit. And there was a number of comments, very positive comments we gathered during the survey, but here's one comment. It's a valuable skill to have for a manager to prevent escalation of situations and to resolve long-standing conflicts. So this is the message that are coming back from your managers and others who've been trained to work as mediators. So it's 1:30 now. We're aiming for 45 minutes. I've got the last few slides to run through. If anyone does have any questions, then I'm happy to stay on the line after this, and of course do present any questions as we're talking. I'm very happy to answer questions, or you're also free to email me. You will receive an email after the webinar with a link to the recording, and again, I'm very, very happy to answer any questions you might have. So the 5 core competencies for mediating managers. This is probably one of the worst mnemonics you're likely to come across today, so forgive me for that, but it's the best I could come up with. Crafting a resolution is priceless. These are the 5 core competencies that I believe managers need to possess in order to be able to handle conflicts or disputes effectively. The first one is a commitment that they can build in the parties to a conflict to come together around the table. I think for any of you who are mediators out there, you'll know that one of the biggest challenges for mediation is the party's willingness to engage in the process. For every one good reason I can give to a party why I think mediation is the best thing since sliced bread, I think I'm up to about 1,465 really good reasons why they should never ever be in a room with each other ever again. Overcoming those blocks and barriers is a real challenge. So one of the first skills that we seek to train managers is how to secure a commitment to mediation from the parties in a dispute when they feel vulnerable and they don't feel safe. And that's about listening, it's about empathy, it's about building rapport, it's about really engaging with the parties to recognise some of the barriers and the challenges, and also recognise that at a stage of conflict, the fight or flight response causes us to feel unsafe. So the manager can create a safe space for the parties to come together. Actively listening is such an important attribute of any leadership or management activity. 2 ears, 1 mouth, giving the parties a really good listening to. For those managers who are able to engage in a dialogue with those people in a dispute and really hear what's being said, actively listening, asking questions, summarising, paraphrasing, engaging, being aware of their own body language, aware of others' body language, and really hearing what's being said, has a number of multiple benefits. It enables the parties to feel heard. It allows the parties to vent. It allows the parties to manage their conflict in a less effective way, a less emotional way, in a more rational or cognitive way. And so for any of you who have ever gone up to a trusted confidant or a friend or a relative, and you've been seeking some guidance on a particularly challenging issue, and you've shared this with that individual, and then you said to them, but thank you so much, that's really been helpful, and they look at you slightly aghast and say, well, I didn't really say anything. And it's not that they needed to offer you advice, it's that that individual needed to be heard, or you need to be heard in order to be able to manage in a more cognitive way or more rational way the conflict through your mind. And of course we become very irrational or affective when we're sat alone at a keyboard framing a grievance. Reframing is the ability on a simple level to move a don't to a do, a can't to a can, a won't to a will. She never listens to me. What I hear you say is you need to be heard. He'll never change. So I think what I'm hearing is you need things to be done differently tomorrow. What needs to be done differently tomorrow to make you feel happier in the workplace? If she did listen to you, what would you say to her? What needs do you think she might have? And in using the reframing skills, the mediating manager is able to move away from the polarized, adopted positions that the parties have taken, the entrenchment that exists, the dogma that we're familiar with, and transform and reframe those conflicts from destructive to constructive. Reframing is one of the most important and powerful skills that we possess as mediators. And it's almost like when we're training managers, you're sprinkling fairy dust on the parties in the city. It's almost like how on earth did you manage to do that? What have you done in order to be able to move the parties from such a negative position to something so constructive? For me as a mediator, it's about recognizing that actually when we're in conflicts and disputes, our perception is so negative and destructive of the other person that we use language like she never listens to say I need to be heard, but it's screaming out for the reframe, which is I'm hearing you need to be heard. And I think upskilling managers to reframe language is such an important skill. It's probably for me, one of the most important skills. The fourth of the 5 competencies that we train managers is about the ability to remain impartial when everybody else wants you to take sides. We've already discussed in the webinar the ability of managers to act with integrity and to act impartially, and I believe managers doing this all of the time. However, there are certain hooks that people will throw in to get you to take sides, and there are certain emotional buttons or triggers that we all have that can cause us to be partisan or to take a view. For managers, it's about exploring those and giving managers the permission to share some of their own internal buttons and triggers and reactions to difficult situations, to voice them, to be aware and cognizant of the tactics and games that people will play in order to be able to get them to take sides. And it's about self-awareness. So in training managers in partiality, what we're actually training managers in is being self-aware and being themselves and being authentic to themselves whilst being acting with integrity. And the final of the 5 skills is a wonderful skill for any manager and leader to possess. It's problem solving, how to resolve a presenting problem. Not positional bargaining, perhaps the route that many managers understand and recognize, but actually using a needs or interest-based framework for negotiation based on the principles of principled negotiation, which move the parties away from their positions and enable them to describe and discuss their interests and needs in a more mature, a more rational and a calmer way. And actually what managers tell me is the parties need the same thing. They need to be heard. They need to feel valued. They need to feel respected. It doesn't matter which side of the table you're sat on, those needs are common and shared. And as we know in conflict, we dehumanize one another very quickly. We form a view or a perception of the other person. And actually by undertaking or having these 5 core competencies, managers are able to tackle some of those perceptions and actually able to create a more inclusive, safer team within which issues can be resolved and challenges can be managed more authentically and effectively. It's funny doing a webinar because normally you stop and people's hands shoot up and you get questions. But I hope this is proving to be useful, and we're coming to the final couple of slides. Again, this is we have so many testimonials. We run training courses in company, which is our preferred way of working. We go into organisations and design the course around the organisation, and we're really good at understanding the context and the needs of our organisations and the customers that we work with, then designing a training solution around them. The trainings we'll see might be over one day or over a couple of days, and we're also developing an e-learning platform here at TCM, recognising that some of these key skills can be taught in a virtual environment as well as in a classroom environment. So if you are interested in rolling out particularly the 5 competencies for your managers and leaders without needing to become classroom-based, which is a big investment of time and money, please do let us know, and we'll be very happy to share with you some of our developments in the area of e-learning, which I think are going to be very exciting. The 2 core offers that we do provide for organisations, there's a 2-day course we offer, which is Practical Mediation Skills, which is endorsed through the Institute of Leadership and Management. That tends to be for senior managers or for high-level managers who are perhaps called in as at informal resolution stage or stage 1 grievance resolution. So it's a little bit more involved. There's more practical activities and role plays, but it's an excellent course and delivered by expert facilitators. Core mediation skills is a one-day course. That's more aligned to those people on the line, and it's a particularly suitable course for supervisors, line managers, and frontline managers in terms of how to spot, handle, and resolve disputes using the 5 core competencies that I've referred to earlier, coupled with the e-learning modules and platforms that we'll be launching fairly shortly. So drawing to the end now, the conclusion for today, the conclusion I've drawn from today preparing for the webinar, your managers are the best mediators your company has. I'm a good mediator. My team here are good mediators. I'm sure I've got a great number of good mediators on the line for the webinar today. But if we can upskill on managers, give them the competence and confidence to mediate, that's, for me, is where we're going to see wholesale cultural change from adversarial to collaborative processes. But they can't do this in a vacuum. The adversarial grievance processes have taken their toll in a great number of organisations. They've diminished confidence and competence, and we need to support our managers and trainers, our managers and leaders to be able to handle conflicts and disputes effectively. Mediation and leadership are inextricably linked. In order to be an effective leader and manager within an organisation, to be able to deliver transformational leadership at a time where our organisations are needing to transform, to be creative, to be fit for purpose and drive economic growth, we're relying on our managers to deliver those benefits. Conflicts and disputes are a major block and barrier to transformation and change, and I would argue that mediation is a central tenet of the effective leadership or management model. And mediation delivers for managers and for organisations real human and financial returns. It's not just a cosy chat, as I said at the beginning of the webinar. This is about driving real business performance and ensuring that your companies are fit for purpose for the future. Mediation works, and I'm sure you're familiar with, or if not, I'm happy to provide a paper that I wrote called Mediation Works, which also provides information about our organisation. A few webinars that we're planning as part of this series. These are all free of charge. They'll be between half an hour and 45 minutes. I may try and bring them down to 30 minutes for future webinars to make them accessible. I'd love to have you join me again for future webinars. So we'll be focusing on mediation and change, which is, I think, is the next one. Mediation and economic growth, for the important role that mediation can play in unblocking the barriers to economic growth and building growth within the UK. I'll also be looking at the role that the UK can play as an international beacon or benchmark for dispute resolution for other countries. I believe that as a country we should be celebrating the important work we're doing around dispute resolution, and I don't think we do it enough. Mediation and emotional intelligence is an area I'm particularly interested in, so we'll be picking up some of the things I've been talking about today in terms of empathy, appreciation. Mediation and the psychological contract, again, mediation. A psychological contract isn't talked about very much in organisations. We're very focused on the employment contract, but for me, it's the psychological contract which is the most important one. So we'll look at mediation and its important role in supporting that. We'll look at the role of mediation in small and medium-sized enterprises. TCM is doing a lot of work in this sector, and we'll be looking at the important role mediation can play in driving success within the SME sector. We'll be looking at webinar 6 is an introductory webinar, so if you've got managers or leaders in your organisation who are sceptical or cynical, who aren't sure about this approach, think it's a bit pink and fluffy or new age or progressive or any of the other messages you may have heard at times about mediation, this is the webinar for them. I'll be doing a very basic but hopefully very powerful overview of mediation. We'll look at webinar number 7 is setting up a successful internal mediation scheme. That's for people who are coordinating or thinking about setting up a scheme, as well as those organisations who already have a scheme and would just like to do a little check-in that their scheme is meeting current best practice. Seminar 8 is going to be looking at mediation and inclusion, the role that mediation can play in promoting equality and diversity within the workplace, something I'm very passionate about. And then finally, number 9, we'll be looking at the role that mediation can play in supporting Lean Six Sigma thinking within organisations. So for those of you interested in business process re-engineering and change management and Lean Six Sigma thinking, then that could be the webinar for you as well. So that's the end of the session today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening, and I think I'll hand over to Michelle now, who will provide a few final thoughts.
Thank you, David. Once again, thank you to all the delegates for joining us today. We do hope that you found the webinar useful. Please do join us again for our next webinar, Mediation and Change, on the 12th of June. Details can be found on our website, www.thetcmgroup.com, and we will send all delegates a booking link plus a recording of this webinar very shortly. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.